Welcome back to exoticcarplayplace, everyone. Thanks for joining in on this beautiful afternoon. Today we're going to try to dive into the minds of automotive mechanics and understand why do they hate BMW so much. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Mark with exoticcarplayplace, and today, before we really get into the whole 6 reasons why mechanics find these cars so hateful to work on, we've got to understand, first of all, regular BMW mechanics go through years of rigorous training, have access to tools and equipment, whereas the old 35, 40-year vets who are normally just used to working on old tin can cars find these cars very daunting. Now, as cars become all more advanced, BMWs are leading the advancement in a lot of that technology. It takes years of training, access to technical equipment, and specialized procedures to find working on these cars just another day at the shop. So the first reason why BMWs tend to be hated by many mechanics is the simple fact that they're over-engineered. As a matter of fact, BMWs are one of the leading innovators in the industry, and as a result, they're always seeking for cars with more performance, better economy, all-around better packaging. And as a result, engineers are forced to package things in such a way that create these efficiencies. Right here we have a diesel engine. These are pretty straightforward. This is one of BMW's more robust engines. However, when you look into some of the V8 turbo engines now that you find in current generation BMWs, they have what they call the hot V. Well, the hot V is there to improve efficiency, reduce turbo lag because they put the turbos much closer to the exhaust manifolds, spins the turbos quicker, creates a quicker power delivery. With that, of course, creates heat. And of course, access to some of these parts, turbos and oil lines, is much more compromising. As well, some of the other cars, the inline 6-cylinder cars, for example, the N54 turbocharged 6-cylinder engine that BMW made a few years back. Cars like that are made, the turbos are placed to one side of the engine. Down below, you actually have to remove subframe to gain access to the turbos if you have to replace any of the parts, whether it be wastegates or turbos. So that can be frustrating. Let's also not forget about other simple parts. Here's a generic BMW, relatively late model vehicle. Now, hiding behind this little shroud is the actual brake booster. So to gain access, to top it up, to check it, you have to remove this shroud. But to remove this shroud, you have to remove that one first. And honestly, this just goes, and this is a trickling effect. A lot of times to gain access to other major engine components, you have to remove other plastic pieces. Sometimes to gain access to a lot of the mechanical parts down there, for example, EGR, and you have other parts, the EGR cooler, this has to come out. But to gain access to this, you have to sometimes remove other lines. There's other parts that have to be accessed. So to gain access to one part, often you have to strip apart a whole lot of other components. But this isn't done so BMW can just anger its customers and its mechanics. It's there for efficiency, packaging to fit it in this tight confounds of an engine compartment. And so another reason why BMWs are often hated by mechanics is generally they're hated by generalized mechanics. Mechanics who are less experienced, don't quite have the education with this particular brand, and find themselves getting very frustrated and angry trying to get into and tear into parts to replace them. Because often there's a lot of specialized training, specialized tools, information on how to access some of these parts is not readily available to some of these generic mechanics. As a result, a non-factory trained mechanical technician often doesn't have that level of experience and just becomes very frustrated and ends up calling out the brand as very, very poorly designed, overcomplicated, and trash. Now, another reason why a lot of mechanics hate modern BMWs is the excess use of plastic under the engine compartments. Let's take a look. Everywhere you look, you've got plastic shrouds, you've got plastic reservoirs, more plastic reservoirs, plastic parts here, you've got plastic covers, plastic, and when you're all done with that plastic, you've got other plastic parts. Plastic here, plastic down there, plastic here. But plastic isn't always your enemy. Plastic is cheaper generally to manufacture. Sometimes that translates down to the consumer. Plastic is also often easier to install because a lot of these fittings, even though they're hateful sometimes when they're old and sometimes they'll break, are often easier to reinstall. So if you're changing a new rad hose, snap, clip, and you're done. Versus putting the old rubber hose on and sometimes twisting down the hose clamp and finding them leak anyhow. So a lot of these fittings are made to be quick to reinstall. The other thing is a lot of these specialized electrical connections actually have specialized little pull clips. If an inexperienced mechanic starts reefing on those, he finds themselves breaking clips. They start snapping in their hands, and next thing you know, that mechanic's trash talking BMW again. All it takes is a little bit of experience, knowledge, understanding as to the actual proper way to access some of those connectors to prevent breaking them off. If you're a ramrod, you'll break them. If you're cautious and experienced and knowledgeable, usually you'll get away without a problem. And besides that, BMW is not the only manufacturer using plastic anymore. Sure, there's lots of plastic. Have you seen a modern-day Toyota, a modern-day Lexus? How about a Ford or a Dodge? How about as well as a Mercedes, Audi, or any other brand on the planet today has highly stepped up with the mass amount of utilization of plastic in the engine compartment just for cost savings, weight, and just ease of installation on the initial manufacturing. Another reason why a lot of mechanics, particularly that aren't BMW mechanics specific from the factory, hate these cars is the fact that there's such a mass investment required for specialized test equipment. I mean, just look around. It's a very complex engine design. It's made to run powerfully, get maximum fuel economy very efficiently. You always get a smooth idle. There's lots of technology, both for the vehicle operation as well as a lot of the extra features that give you the comfort within the vehicle. The problem with all of that technology, which is also, by the way, not unique to BMW, is that BMW operates with a lot of different unique test equipment. Let's talk about protocols, hardware, and equipment. For example, some acronyms: INPA, NCS, DIS, SSS, ISTA. They're all acronyms for equipment and protocols to communicate with the computers that are often on board with these vehicles. Now, the reality is it's nothing to be afraid of, but unfortunately your backyard scab mechanic often can't afford to purchase all of this equipment, and as a result really can't properly diagnose what's going on under the hood, or they just start replacing parts like a good old-fashioned Ford mechanic. That is something that is always a concern for anybody working on a modern-day vehicle, is not being able to communicate with the computers on board. Now, there's yet another reason why a lot of mechanics hate BMWs, like this one, for example, and that is the fact that there's often very specific and unique protocols and procedures for repairs and updates on these vehicles. For example, here's a BMW key. Often, there's a lot more going on than just the key. There's actually equipment you can plug this into. It can tell you all what's going on in terms of your service history. There's also coding that you can do, so this can provide different features, whether you want to unlock doors, lock doors, activate lights, what have you. You can code this. But did you also know that when you're doing work on the brakes, and say, for example, you need to bleed the brakes because you've just done a brake change, there's actually electronic procedures utilized by factory technicians to assist them with speedy and accurate brake bleeding or brake flushing. And another procedure, how about the cooling system? Well, if you're driving a modern BMW and it happens to have an electric water pump, often if you're replacing the pump, the thermostat, maybe you're doing a coolant flush or some other component within the cooling system, you often need to bleed the system. But to do that on a lot of them with the electric water pump now, there's an actual simplistic way electronically. No longer need to leave the rad cap off and bubble it over. With this situation, you top it up, you close the cap, you turn the ignition on, hold the throttle for 12 seconds, and it actually starts to activate the water pump. And the water pump goes through a series of different gurgles and speeds, and it actually bleeds the system automatically. You can walk away for 10 minutes, come back, and your system is fully bled off. On top of that, if you ever have to change your battery, which in this case, you'll notice the terminal's output here, but the battery's actually in the back of the vehicle, which makes boosting a lot safer. However, if you need to replace the battery, as you see in a lot of these BMWs, there's actually coding that's required. If you don't properly code your battery after an install, you can actually have a battery that burns out again in short order or have other charging system related issues. So you've always got to do the right coding, you've got to follow the right procedures, and a lot of these inexperienced mechanics hate it because they don't even know that these procedures exist. And yet another reason why inexperienced 35-year mechanics hate working on BMWs is the fact that these cars often need a whole plethora of highly advanced, unique, specialized tools that cost a lot of money to fill up in your toolbox. For example, Vano solenoid sockets, crankshaft holders, camshaft bridge, window pullers, ignition locks, and a whole host of unique sockets, extensions, swivels, Torx bits, things that are not normally part of a regular mechanic's toolbox, often now have to be purchased especially just to work on these particular cars. And with all that said, my background is a strong do-it-yourselfer with an engineering background. I do believe that there are great things about these cars. Sure, BMW's had some bad cars along the years, so has Toyota and Honda and Ford and GM. Every manufacturer has some trips along the way. You just need to understand what mechanics are thinking and why they don't seem to like BMWs. So with all that said, everybody, I'd love to hear what you guys say in the comments section about BMWs, and are mechanics valid in making these assumptions about the brand as well. Be sure to hit that subscribe button over there and come back real soon. Hope to see you then. Bye-bye.